since that was your first V16 and it was no joke of a hard climb, what did that do to your vision of the future and how did it change what you decided to get on next?
Yeah, it opened up a lot of possibilities for me mentally. At that point, I was like, well, I don't feel limited anymore. Like, I don't think that there's a boulder that I can't do. And that was literally my mentality. A lot of ways, it still is, because that was kind of the first time I pushed through a process like that. And I saw all the benefits of like going all in on something in that way. And it really did just kind of open those doors for me. And like, oh, I want to try harder boulders because I know that this process works. Like, I saw something like this all the way through on a boulder like this. And so, how can this process work on other boulders? And so I've just kind of taken that to every hard boulder that I've done since then, and used a similar process.
Matt Fultz, welcome to the Testpiece podcast, man. How are you doing?
What's up, Josh? Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Dude, Matt, so psyched to get to talk to you. We had a little gap between when we last talked. You were in Squamish and you wound up that trip not too long ago. I want to start off by asking you possibly a very obvious question. Uh, when someone like you, a solid V16 climber, goes on a trip to an area, how do you decide what to get on? Because like theoretically, there's like thousands of climbs there, like they're all fair game. Like, how do you narrow that down, man?
It's funny. I mean, obviously, you go by psych first. But yeah, it's funny for a short trip like I had. I mean, I was there for 10 days. I really don't have that much open to me because I take so long to project things. Like, usually things take me so many days. And so I actually have to be a pretty specific with what I want to do. But yeah, usually it's something that I know is going to be a good challenge for me. And I would also love to be able to do it on that trip. Like, it's nice to kind of come home with something. Uh, so yeah, I'm pretty good about doing my homework. I'll watch videos and I'll make my little lists, and then I'll go and just try it out. So when I went, I had like two or three potential like projects that I thought I might be able to do in like 3 sessions or less, and I tried each of those, and then I kind of honed down on the one that I was most psyched on.
You like sending too. Okay. All right, cool. I get
Yeah,
it.
it's my preference if I can choose. Yeah.
Well, I saw on Instagram that you did The Reckoning, I think it was, which is a classic that's right there at the farm. What other ones did you look at and what drew you to them?
Yeah, so the Reckoning was like probably even before the trip, the thing that I wanted to try the most. It's just um, interesting stylistically. It isn't fully my style, uh, as like in my opinion, and but I know it's a classic, and I've seen lots of videos of it, and the moves are just so cool, and I thought it would be a good one to kind of just test out my shape and how I'm feeling. The other one I really wanted to try was deadlift, and I did get a session on that, and but my problem was I was there. It was just Haley and we had like 3 pads, and deadlift's like really weird to pad up. I was surprised that the landing was kind of sketch, so I wasn't as psyched on that one, and so we just kind of I just dug into the Reckoning the rest of the trip.
Well, it's a beauty, and yeah, you can definitely pad that one out. And I feel like it packs a lot of climbing into that. I don't know, maybe 9 foot, 10 foot tall boulder. There's all sorts of recycling. I just want to shout out a climb at the farm. So this is in Squamish at the farm, which is a famous. I don't know if it's famous. It's a spot, and they have, I think, maybe one of the best V7s I've ever done there, called Squealing Pork. It's like right around the corner from the Reckoning, and right around the corner from Resurrection too. So for any mere mortals listening, that the Reckoning maybe is, it's a little tough, Matt. That's a tough climb. It's not accessible to everyone.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it was a good challenge for me because mainly because I wasn't happy with the weather that we got as well. So and I know that's a common thing to deal with in Squamish, but when I felt like we had a short trip, like a 10-day trip, and uh, I was a little bit frustrated about that. I think looking beforehand, looking ahead, I was pretty psyched because it was like, okay, well, they just got a ton of rain, but we're gonna get there right when we have like 3 days no rain, and then it's gonna rain a bunch for a couple days, and then we'll have like 3 more days of no rain. I was like, okay, perfect, awesome. Well, when we got there, it was so like the ground was still soaked and it was so humid, and like it just did not, like the rock just did not feel good. And I also don't know because I haven't climbed there that much. So I was like, is the rock is and I'd never tried the reckoning. So it's like, is it supposed to feel like this? Like I'm just sliding? Like, is this just a really slidey boulder? And so I spent a couple of like frustrating sessions on it until I went and it was actually dry. And I was like, oh, this is how it's actually supposed to feel. And so I think I actually got like 2 dry sessions on it.
I've never been in Squamish and felt like the holds were sticky and tacky, and I always
Right.
wonder what it's like there. And I think talking
Must
about
be nice.
projecting, oh God, I mean, but it's really frustrating because there's so many good climbs, and on top of that, the style is so subtle and body position, and I just I felt like it's hard for me to even find body positions when the holds are so bad I can't even try out different body positions. So I've had some frustrating days in Squamish and some of the most fun ever in Squamish. What a special place to spend your summer in, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and you're right. Like it is tough to even like work through those little tactics and like techniques when you're like, well, if the holds feel better, maybe I'll do it in a different way, or maybe I'm stressing so much on this section I don't need to. Yeah, it was fun. Like I went and I learned. So yeah, mission accomplished even without a send.
But you did send, so congrats on that.
Mhm.
And
Thanks.
you just mentioned tactics, and it's something that I definitely want to dive into a little bit later. But after my what I thought was maybe just an obvious or dumb question about Squamish, I want to move into just giving you a little intro, Matt. I do think that most people listening would recognize your name and know that you're a good climber, but I'm not sure people truly understand the level that you climb at, Matt. You've sent 8 V16s, which is a lot. And I also want to point out that the first one you sent was Hypnotized Minds, a rarely repeated, notoriously hard V16. And then your most recent one, Big Z, is also a rarely repeated, notoriously hard V16. So it's not like you're just out there taking the easy V16s. You're really going for the really tricky ones. And on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, you are also a prolific developer. You've FA'd 7 climbs, V15 and up, and you recently had a day where you FA'd 2 V15s in a day, which I I really think that may be like a world's first, but who's counting? Whatever, you know. Good job on that too, Matt.
Thank
Hold
you.
on. There's a lot more. And if that wasn't enough, you also have FA'd some of the hardest board climbs in the world, which is very important to me. Maybe people don't all know that when they can't go Squamish or go to areas and see them, but it's actually just in their local gym. So very cool that you've done some of the hardest board climbs in the world. And I want to get into that too. But still, Matt, you also have won multiple national level competitions, and you also have been a coach for 13 plus years. And you have one of the most highly respected programs out there from your company, you and your wife's company, Off the Ground. I'm just going to call it OTG. Uh, and Matt, just congrats on an absolutely amazing career, dude.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. That's a great introduction. I'm like proud and embarrassed at the same time. So I appreciate that.
Well, you should just be proud. I'm just excited to get to talk to someone who has done all those things. And even when you do an intro, of course I had to shorten up too. So that does include probably the decade of all the hard climbing building up to those highlights. So, that's kind of the under the ground stuff that I feel like someone like you who has put in the time put in the effort, done those days of projecting. We sum up these highlights in one sentence, but it's really decades.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks so much again. I appreciate that, Josh.
Well, Matt, I thought it'd be fun to start out by talking about OTG because I just think that hearing about how you coach climbers will give us some insight into how you view climbing yourself and thus have had so much success in your career. So, can you just tell me a little bit about why you decided to pursue coaching and what your kind of principles are as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm trying to think of how far back I should go. So I started coaching actually in 2010. I was a freshman in college, and I was studying exercise science, and it seemed like a logical progression. I'd been climbing for a long time, and I enjoyed working with kids. So uh, my friend Mike Bacchino was the head coach at it was then the front in Boise, and he asked me if I wanted to be an assistant coach, while I was a student, and I was ecstatic to do that and work with him and learn from him, and then grow in a relationship with those kids was really the fun part too. And yeah, and then I kind of like started building my own programs, and then eventually I became the head coach when Mike moved down to Salt Lake, and just had such an awesome time learning how to coach youth athletes, as well as coaching myself. So kind of adapting my own workouts to make them sort of appropriate for youth competitors was my strategy at that time. And then uh, when I graduated college, I moved down to Salt Lake City, and I coached the youth team at the front down there for several years, and that's kind of where I also became the head coach there, and that's where I found that I just this is what like I want as my career. I want to coach, and I love coaching in person. I love coaching youth athletes as well. But where eventually it took me, I moved to Boulder and I coached at ABC, Team ABC there as well. But where it eventually took me was during the pandemic. My wife Haley and I started off the ground strength and nutrition, and so we do remote coaching for adult athletes. And I love coaching adult athletes because they're a bit more motivated. It seems like they have a little bit more skin in the game compared to a lot of the youth climbers who we'll say, especially at ABC, were highly motivated. But at the same time, we had several athletes that, it's totally, climbing was what they made it. But it was their after school program. They were coming in and they're like, well, I have practice today. And that's kind of what it was to them. But that's never what climbing was to me. Climbing was just like, I had like a thrill in my heart on the like Tuesdays and Fridays when I got to go, when I got to go with my dad climbing, and he would take me to the gym. And so that's kind of the energy that I'm looking for in my clients, and that's generally what we get with our OTG athletes.
It's no fun trying to convince people that they should be having fun right now. I'd much prefer to have people bought in. And those are some amazing programs that you're involved in. I mean, Team ABC is legendary, but so is the front team. I mean, that was, I mean, and Mike Bacchino is an incredible person to get to work with. What, other than just the motivation factor, what are the things that you see that kids do well and don't do well, and contrasting that with psyched adult athletes?
Yeah, well, kids are so intuitive and they pick up on things so quickly. Um, and so it just, yeah, it seems like they're learning so easily. uh so I think one thing that and we might talk about this later, but one thing that I'm pretty good at is like I can climb, and if I fall, I can identify pretty well what went wrong, and then I'm pretty good at not making that mistake a second time. And I've kind of learned that from kids in a way. Like I've kind of just watching kids and seeing that like how quickly they pick up coaching. and like they can make a mistake, and then if they're told like this is what you did wrong and this is how you should correct it, and then they're pretty good at doing that, it's like, that needs to be something that I, just verbalizing it, like seeing it, and then saying out loud is like helped me to do it myself and try to replicate that. And so I think kids do that intuitively, and sometimes adults need to be just like told like this is so let's shift the attentional focus in a different direction than on your next attempt.
So what I'm hearing you say is that oftentimes adults both don't know why they failed and then have a hard time even correcting it when they get the cue that that was why they felt like, hey, your left foot popped. I know you felt like it was your hand that popped, but it was actually your left foot that popped. Uh, yeah, do you use video with them, or like how do you reinforce that with them?
Yeah, video analysis is the biggest thing. It's kind of like on my end, that's the highest value. Our athletes send in their climbing videos, and then we assess their movement and their tactics together. And I just think that's such a great way to learn. That like second only to being there in person and getting that feedback in the moment. But it's hard to, we have 75 clients. It's hard to be there in person with 75 people, and then if we were in person too, it'd be a lot more expensive. Um, so yeah, this is just a great way that they can send in those videos to me on their projects or even on like the sends that they're proud of, and then we just like dive in. We go into detail and figure out what went wrong and what went right, and how we can shift our attention on the next session.
Right, since we're all not since there can only be so many clients that you work with, can you help share with us the eyes that you look at these videos with and give us some of the things that really stand out where people often go wrong? Like, just, I think that the reason why I'm asking this is that I get a lot of questions where people are like, yeah, I took video myself, and then they watch it and they're like, yeah, I fell, I suck. Like, it's terrible. Like, why did I fall there? And just what, how do you put your coach's eyes on and critique videos?
Right. So I'm looking for a number of things, and it usually depends on the level. But some common mistakes that I see are things like precision. I see a lot of unnecessary readjusting, and that's killing their efficiency. So yeah, being precise with their hands and their feet uh, is important. But also on the flip side of that, I see pacing issues. So moving too quickly. Uh, Through delicate sections where they need to maybe slow down, take a breath, and find and strengthen their center, or moving too slowly through overhangings and they lose their efficiency and they get pumped out. And so learning how to adjust your pacing when it's appropriate, either faster or slower. Uh, and ironically, that goes sometimes opposite of precision because there's the speed to accuracy trade-off. So you can go fast, but you're gonna lose some of your accuracy, or you can go slow, but you're gonna lose some of your speed and thus some of your efficiency. So uh, that's a difficult balance to navigate for a lot of climbers. I mean, for any climber, really. Like I have trouble with it sometimes too, like figuring out what the exact pacing I need for every section of every boulder. It takes a lot of trial and error, but it's something that I want a lot of my climbers to be conscious of and just kind of take note of those things and try to correct those.
Makes me think of those. You ever have those end of the session tries where you're just wrecked? You know, you are so tired. And so you just kind of get a little bit loose and say, I'm going to just try to sprint this boulder. Like, I'm going to be unprecise. I know I don't have like the endurance right now, but I'm going to Hail Mary it. I definitely think about that where it's just, and then sometimes it works and you get kind of lucky. Like when you just go for stuff quickly, you do lose precision. But sometimes when you roll the dice, it comes up good. Well, how do you use video on yourself when you're doing these projecting, when you're projecting?
Yeah, it's a little bit trickier to self coach sometimes. But yeah, I absolutely do. Usually or often Haley will come out climbing with me, and she's kind of on the video. But if not, I have a tripod or the phone in the shoe technique also. And, yeah, I do use video analysis on myself as well. Like, um, yeah, I'll use that to try and navigate where I went wrong, and also what went well. But usually it feels a little less effective for myself because I'm pretty good at kind of knowing, because I experienced it, kind of knowing what went wrong, and then I can confirm it with the video. But there are times where videos definitely helped. Um, just in like specific instances.
All right, this is a tricky question. But I was just talking with a buddy about this yesterday. Do you ever have this thing where maybe you're flashing a climb and you do a move, you're just kind of intuiting how it's going, and then you try to do the move again, and somehow it's like you can't do it. You can't find that body position. Like, do you ever have that problem where you almost can like unsend a move? And how do you tackle that situation? Sorry, that's super specific, but I'm sure you've encountered it.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll go back, and sometimes that's where video is nice. Like, there are times where I'm struggling with a move that I think, and I'm struggling with it because I'm not putting the effort in that I feel like I need to, because maybe it was a move that I did first try and it didn't feel too bad, but I was actually trying harder than I remembered, and so now I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, I don't want to waste energy like going all out 100% on this move that I know that I can do first try. But actually, I was going 100% all out on that move when I did it first try. So there are kind of those kind of things, and going back to videos and video review, kind of on the same topic. Like, there are times where um, I feel like I take forever on a move, like, or like I'm really inaccurate and I have to readjust, and I'm like, I was there for like 30 seconds in that spot, and then I'll go back to video and be like, oh, that was like 2 seconds of like hesitation, but it felt so long because I'm exerting myself, and I'm straining. But sometimes that's when like video is really helpful as well. Like, you're like, oh, okay, I actually can just be there for a second and like take a second and get it good. Or again, like on the flash tries, you'd be like, okay, I actually was trying really hard on that try, and that's just a move that requires 100% effort and precision.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I hate those lead-in moves on a climb where you can do the move, but you have to really hang it all out there, even though like you can consistently do it, but you're like, I wish this took just 5% less effort. Like, it makes me wonder if when Haley's on video, if she can like tell when you're about to send. She's probably videoed you so many times that right when you pull on, I wonder if she has like a second sense or sixth sense where she's like, oh, this one, Matt's doing it. We'll have to ask her next
Yeah,
time.
sometimes. Yeah,
You know.
maybe.
Okay, well, we talked about video analysis, but I is that the first thing you do with a new athlete? Like, what's it like when you first start working with a new athlete? Like, what's that intake look like? Like, how do you think about climbers and how to kind of understand where they are, and I'm guessing that helps you figure out where they need to go.
Yeah, well, we have a questionnaire that they fill out as the initial assessment, and it's just simple things, kind of like how many days per week they're comfortable training, some of their accomplishments that they're proud of recently, and some of their goals coming up, short term, long term, that kind of stuff. And then I put them through just a standardized test week. So we're doing strength metric testing as well as qualitative analysis, and that's that video review, and that's the most important day. And that's when I ask for a few separate videos, maybe some attempts on their projects, and then some sublimit boulders, maybe a send that they were proud of that they have on film, and then maybe a hard flash for them. And I look at their movement patterns throughout those climbs, and then I'm able to kind of assess what movement drills we can add into their program to start out.
When you see someone sending at their limit like that, this is the video of me sending really hard, Matt. Uh, do you typically see people kind of struggling up their climb, or does it look really easy? Like it's yeah. Do you get why I'm asking that question? Like, does it look easy when they send at their limit, or does it really look like they're barely eking it out?
Sure. Yeah. And it depends sometimes. Usually it looks easier. And, I say it looks easy on the send go, and you're not seeing all the other tries along with it, because it had to be on that go. Like there's, it's often when I'm at my limit, I have to hit everything just right. I have to get the positions just right. And when you do that for every move, then it looks pretty easy. But if you don't do that for every move, then you fall, and no one's seeing that video. So, that's kind of like that's just how it goes usually. But there are those like satisfying ones that I have sometimes, and I get to see some of my athletes have sometimes, that are like, it was a fight, and, they're grunting through it, and they might even, hit a hold just a little bit wrong, and they have to adjust or just kind of deal with it. And those are the exciting and like pretty satisfying sends. But
All right, that makes sense, and it's something that I noticed when I would be on the couch injured, reviewing my glory days, looking at my hard sends. But the reason why it stood out to me, and I wanted to ask, is that what I noticed is that when I would send at my limit, it would look really easy, but in my head, it felt really hard, and I was trying my hardest, and it made me kind of think about what it means to try hard. And it's like, is it that you're bearing down even harder, or is it that you're committing to each position as best as you can? And for me, just I was wondering if I was the only one who was seeing that like when I do well, it actually looks quote unquote easy. And some of the lessons I took from there is like, oh, that means that what you need to do is not try hard, and that like you get the hold wrong and you just need to really try hard. It's more, you need to commit to the technique that is best for each move.
yeah, 100%. And that's what I mean. Like if you're truly at your limit, then you kind of have to hit those positions correctly, and because when you don't, you're gonna fall. So
Well, on that note of sending at your limit, I know that you are a master of tactics, and that you said something to me about this idea of, with the right tactics, you can get better right now, not in 6 months, but today on your project. And so, I wanted to hear some of your favorite tactics and how they've evolved over the last decade.
yeah, sure. I mean, that's something I tell my athletes all the time, and I have to remember myself too. Is like, you can get better at climbing, like right now through this podcast. Like, yeah, maybe listening to podcasts is a good tactic for people. Um,
Definitely, yes, Matt.
yes,
That
yes. But yeah, some simple things. It's like doing your homework is a big one. That's what I tell people often. Is, if you're going to an area and you have a project in mind that you want to try it, there are resources for you online. There's videos. Um, it's likely there are videos. There's not videos of everything, but you should try and find those videos. You should reach out to maybe people that have done it already and ask their advice, what they found. It's nice to know when boulders are in the shade. It's nice to know, if it's going to be, if you're on a warmer trip, it's nice to know, is night climbing, safe and legal and accepted there. Then maybe that's something you should do. Maybe you should invest in some lights, and maybe a Makita fan, for those conditions. And so there are some tactics like that you can just relatively easily implement into your climbing that are going to help you send harder, and you don't even have to get stronger, and your technique doesn't even have to improve, but you can just send harder that way.
I mean, one of the things about bringing good tactics is just like we were talking about on the reckoning with Squamish, is that sometimes when it's overly humid or just if conditions aren't right, it's in the sun, it's almost like you can't even find the right body position. It really can change the climb. I will say I could argue the other side that sometimes Squamish has taught me a lot because it's so humid and greasy and just bad conditions that forces me to overemphasize good technique. Maybe I have to take the grade down, three
Sure.
notches, but there's something to learn there too. But yeah, it's an important thing, and I'm wondering what did you used to do poorly in tactics that maybe now that you've got decade experience projecting at some of the highest levels, what are some new things that you've brought into your practice, maybe on Big Z versus Hypnotized Minds?
Oh, sure. I guess in that amount of time, tactically, not too much has changed beyond like doing Big Z was more taking that process more to the extreme. Like it was just longer and harder and just more. But I some early mistakes for sure were not really climbing at the same time of day. Like I would climb early in the morning, or like afternoon or late at night, and I'd be confused why I didn't feel super strong early in the morning. And even though I was used to training in the evenings, and I know I'd get frustrated, and that's not until I realized, oh, it's helpful to climb if you can at the same time of the day, and usually early, like late afternoon, early evening is when you perform best. And I think that's most people, but for me specifically too, like I really struggle climbing in the mornings. Not always a morning person. But yeah, and so there are some little things like that, and then of course I think every like beginner mistake, I thought that like, okay, it's finally summer, I can go out and climb on this like dark brown basalt in the middle of the day and grease off all these boulders. Okay, and then I realized the first time I went out in like March or something, it's like, oh, it's it's actually nice when it's cooler.
When you're on these really long projects, like I think both Big Z and Hypnotize, whatever, it doesn't matter which one, just projects that you've spent maybe even seasons under, do you keep track of like the weather of the day, or like, wow, it felt really sticky today, and then you take out your little gauge and it's like humidity was X and there was a northwest wind of 7 miles an hour, like do you try to do you just try to show up and hope for the best, or do you start narrowing things down and say this is going to be a good day likely?
Yeah, you definitely narrow things down. I'm not. I don't have a like a gauge that I bring out to the boulders with me. Although that's probably something that could be useful. Um, Usually, I know just generally like the temperature I prefer, and like the humidity that I prefer, and just hope that those. And then when those things align, then that's like I'm gonna go out that day, and I know it's gonna be good that day. It's also you a lot of it is just experimentation. Like I know that this climb is in the sun at this time, and so I can't hit it until later. And then there's other things like, okay, I know that I prefer to night climb here, and so at this time it's going to be this temperature, and that should be optimal. So that's how I try to plan my sessions.
Okay, we went into techniques and tactics. Matt, you're jacked. You're also very
Oh my
strong. I'm just gonna put that
thanks.
out there. I said I thought maybe you were one of the largest people to climb V16. Uh, and I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on training and strength and just that kind of nitty gritty around just getting more powerful, because I know that you are diligent in all aspects of your training, whether it's strength training, technique, tactics. So let's just pick on that a little bit and hear kind of your principles and thoughts on just kind of brute force training.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I don't actually think of myself as being that strong. I think often, and it might just be in my head, but often when I'm in the gym or even climbing outside, sometimes I think people might be surprised at what I'm struggling on. And uh, I think my greatest strength is that I am willing to go back over and over again. I learn quickly, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty good at identifying what I did wrong when I fall, and then changing it quickly, and uh, and then not making the same mistakes over and over again, and then replicating the good things that I did. So I'm a quick learner. I have good climbing IQ, and then beyond that, I'm willing to just go back over and over again for 20, 30 sessions if I have to. So those things combined, I'm able to do a lot of pretty hard things. Even though I don't feel like I'm like that strong. I can't, I can't rep out 10 one arms like a lot of people can. I feel pretty good if I can do, one or two in a row. And, so those kind of things, my metrics are like not, but you see those beasts online, and they're all over the place that can just like, bust out all those one arms, and they're hanging on like the 6 mil edges. And, yeah, I can't do any of that. But
Well, you're demonstrating some kind of incredible strength when I see you on the boards, especially. Well,
thanks.
but that doesn't mean that you're not putting in your time on fingers and pulling. What does that look like for you? And is it something that you've always been? Is the off the wall training something that has always been a part of your routine?
Yeah, so I've done multiple sports, especially when I was younger. I ran track, played football, and I always learned that athletes lift, and that's what we do. Uh, I always wanted to get stronger at climbing, and so it made sense to me that if you want to get stronger, you should strength train. So I learned how to work out, through my football programming. And so I learned, a lot of the compound lifts. We do bench press, overhead press, back squat, and deadlift. And uh, those are still things that I do to this day. And I think it's helped me overall. I think it's improved my joint stability and just my overall general strength. So it's made me more resistant to injury. And yeah, it's just been super helpful to me overall, just as an athlete.
How do you add those compound movements can be so taxing? How do you know when to push them, or like is it something that you're always trying to push those maximum weights up, or like just how do you balance the exposure to them and the benefits without there's some cost to them, there's fatigue, there's time, there's all of that. How do you go about balancing that especially at your level?
Oh, absolutely. But consistency is most key. I'm not maxing ever, like pretty much ever. I'm not maxing out. I'm just trying to stay consistent, and uh, and like just going in and doing the lifts. And sometimes I even look at them as like these are good full body warm ups for my climbing session. So I actually often lift before I go climbing. Even at the climbing gym, I'll get in and I'll do my bench and I'll do my deads before I put my shoes on and climb. So uh, that I think that's something that's pretty easy to implement for a lot of people. If they're already doing some off the wall warm ups and stretches, then add in a few sets of squats and a few sets of overhead press, or those kinds of things, and then do some weighted pull ups or something. And And yeah, that can go a long way for you. And it's that extra added benefit of, being a good warm up routine.
Huh. That's actually really interesting. I have heard of like runners squatting really heavy not doing a ton of volume, but squatting really heavy right before even a race because it's a big nervous system stimulant. You know, you really
Right.
light up your whole body before max efforts by kind of getting under heavy weights. Do you think about like that, or are you just trying to get in volume at a time when you know if you're in the gym, at least you're gonna get in some kind of weightlifting before climbing?
Yeah. So I really do like the hormonal response to lifting. I think it's really great paired with um, climbing or hangboarding. So I do like to program, usually for myself and my athletes, I do like to program strength training and fingerboard training together.
All right, Matt, I just gotta ask you, how much do you bench, bro?
I actually don't bench too much. I've got this weird wrist thing. I broke my wrist actually in middle school, and it never quite fully healed. So I have to take it kind of easy on the bench sometimes. But like 225.
Not bad, not bad. I when I was in high school, the most common shirt that people wore was you would get a shirt for how much you benched. Like if you benched, 225, you would get a 225 bench. And, some
Sweet.
people in my high school were rocking the 315 shirt as well. Definitely football players. So, that's, it's not normally what I ask on this podcast, but I couldn't
When you
help
bench.
myself. Actually, I'm curious, what position did you play when you played football?
Yeah, I was a running back and also a linebacker. So I went to a medium-sized high school. So I played offense and defense because we didn't have the biggest team. But yeah, running back, linebacker is good times. I got some injuries that I still have to deal with. So sometimes like, oh, why did I ever play football? But like that wrist injury I mentioned was from football, was from playing football. And
Don't worry, you'll have plenty of injuries from climbing that when you get old that you'll look back on too, not so fondly.
Right.
It's,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm already there, man.
it's funny that you were a running back. You're a bigger guy. We're joking about that a little bit, but you are on like the larger side of climbers, and yet you really do seem to head towards thinner lines. Your fingers are incredibly strong, Matt. And I'm wondering what you do for fingers, which is a very distinct part of your body compared to some of the compound lifts we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, I started climbing in 2001, and so I've been climbing a long time. But back then, bouldering was fairly new, relatively new, and every video I saw, it was these just like amazing climbers grabbing really small crimps and doing big moves, and that was what bouldering was to me. Um, and so that's what I wanted to get good at, and that's what I was attracted to. Was I'd go in the gym and I'd try to grab small crimps and do big moves. And so that's just really how I started out climbing, and that's how I developed as a climber. So yeah, doing the board climbing, I have and this and my I have my spray wall and as well as the tension board too in my garage. And my spray wall is all just like it's a 45-degree angle and all just full pad or quarter pad edges, in cuts. And I'm just trying to do, you know, big moves on these on these little in cuts. And um, because that's like the style that is just so cool to me. And so I think, generally you get good at what you like, and that's what I like. And so I think that's it's lucky that that's what I like, and that's what I got pretty good at, because most of the time, if you're climbing outside, you're climbing on crimps, depending on the area, but definitely most of the climbing I do outside.
Are you talking about Fred Nicole? Is that who you're talking about? Because that's what I was thinking
Frenical is
of.
definitely a big part of it. Yeah, definitely a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, of course, like I think my generation, we were looking up, you know, it was all Daniel Woods. So, uh, yeah, it was he's the goat, and definitely like the when we were all trying to emulate.
That guy can crimp.
Yeah.
So what I heard then is, are you saying that a lot of your finger training has been on the wall, maybe on boards, or do you do much hangboarding or pulling, from the ground on, I don't know, a tension block or something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, most of my finger training is on the wall. Because I want to have strong fingers, but I also want to move well on strong fingers. And so I think, you know, I think some people can have strong fingers, but not know how to move well with them. But yeah, additionally, I add in pretty consistent hangboarding. So I just have like a really simple repeater protocol that I enjoy doing a couple times a week. And then I do those block lifts. I call them off the grounds. Uh,
I see what
and
you did
just
there.
adding, yep, exactly. And yeah, just adding weight and kind of going at like an RP9 or like 90% of my max, um, and pulling it a few times off the ground.
Do you hang on super small edges when you're on the hangboard, or are you looking at bigger edges with added weight or one arms? I'm guessing a little bit of everything, but what's kind of like the one that you found the most ROI from?
Yeah, I mean, having a variety is good, and I do like to have to kind of switch grip positions as well. So I'll do my repeaters with like a three finger drag on one session, then half crimp on another. I'll even do full crimp repeaters, and I'll often switch between like 20 mil and 10 mil. I don't often go below 10 mil in my training, but I've found that most of the time, my preference is like a half crimp grip on a 20 mil. Uh, that's just generally kind of like the most versatile grip that I've found, and so that's the one that I train the most.
So you said something about strong fingers are great, but you got to move on those strong fingers. Um, Clearly you can do that because I know how technical all those super hard boulders are, despite them being thin. And just can we speak a little bit about what it's like to move on small holds and do big moves? And because sometimes when I see you on the board, I mean you're flying around, dude. Like you're grabbing holds and jumping, but what like there's more to it than that. Like can you speak a little bit about what it means to do big moves on small crimps?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a lot of like um, center control and like solidifying your center. So like that's what I mean. Like your center of gravity becomes really important, and how it moves through space. So and it's not always just about like jumping. It can also be a lot about like your toe dig and in your tension. So like I call it like your tip to toe tension. So like your fingertips and how and the relationship between your fingertips and when they're on a hold and your toe when it's on the opposite hold. So uh, and you know how that tension between those two and how it interacts and how you're weighting in different ways. There's so much variability there, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice to figure out what kind of the optimal tension is.
Hmm. Yeah, it's always something that I find interesting when I start thinking about getting better at small holds and getting stronger fingers. That there's so many times that just when I adjust my technique, all of a sudden my fingers sure seem stronger. It's like did I really get stronger there, or did I put more weight on my feet, or move in a better way? And that just goes to show you why doing training on boards or thin problems outside really is probably the best translation. So I I know you recently did Big Z. We can talk about Big Z, but Matt, I was blown away when you did Hypnotized Minds. For me, you just mentioned Daniel Woods. When Daniel did Hypnotized Minds, it definitely put a flag in the ground of this is a hard crimp boulder that's very accessible, very beautiful, very sought after. Can you tell me about your journey and ultimate success on Hypnotized Minds?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out trying it even almost as a joke because it looked so impossible, and but it's also so convenient. It's right next to the road. Like you can throw your pads to that boulder. So I think that was helpful in my process with it. But yeah, I kind of started trying it and I did a couple of the moves, but it really just felt impossible. And there was something, I don't know why, but there was just something that was like, man, it would be kind of crazy to do that one someday. And a while later, I went back and put my pads under it. I was like, I'll just try this again because it's right here. And started testing some of the moves and did a couple more moves, but it really felt pretty far off. I think pretty much the whole first season, the first like 3 or 4 sessions that I was trying it, and I hadn't done like pretty much the whole top and um, or like the crux. So there were some missing pieces there, but it was kind of the following season. I went back and it was like cold and snowing, and kind of my first day back when I like did the crux move, and that was a huge aha for me. Like I did the move into the finger lock and then out of it, and that was like a big aha for me. I was like, whoa, I actually can do this. I think um, and then worked through my beta uh, at the top, gained some consistency at the bottom, but then I could just never like even touch the crux when I came from the start. Like I would I could get into the position and like look up at the hold and slap at it when it's like a super accurate finger lock, and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't can't really do that. you know so that's kind of how that next season went. The following year was COVID, and so I didn't go there at all, like in the spring or the summer. But I just trained, like I built a home wall, like a lot of people did, and just trained on my spray wall with the little quarter pad edges, half pad edges, and just was doing big moves on those. And so I kind of did that all summer, and then I started trying hypno again in September, and I found just even on my first session, I was getting like very close to doing it, and I think on my first session I stuck the crux and fell a move or two after that, and then it just took like 3 or 4 sessions beyond that to send it that season. And so that was a big deal for me for a few reasons. I realized, oh man, like this board climbing, like spray wall training thing really works. And it's like, that was like a huge thing for me, learning, like we mentioned, how to climb, not just having the strong fingers, but also like climbing well on the small holds. It was also a big deal to me because it wasn't like I was just my lightest ever. Like I was definitely at a very comfortable, manageable body weight. And, in my opinion, hypno is one of the most intensely crimpy boulders in the country. So, I'm like, well, I can probably just do a lot of boulders at a very comfortable body weight for me. And so yeah, ever since then, I haven't um, done much in the way of like cutting or anything like that. And I've just been more interested in fueling myself for my sins rather than stepping on the scale and like making sure that I weigh a certain amount before I go try my projects.
It's interesting that you bring that up in the context of Hypnotized Minds because if I remember correctly, Daniel Woods climbed it and he was a young Daniel Woods. And then it kind of remained unrepeated for a long time until Rustum came by, I think during like a World Cup. And Rustum was
Mm-hmm.
this amazing Russian comp climber who I I don't know enough. So I don't want to say anything wrong, but my memory of Rustam is that he was quite light, like one of the smallest climbers, and very fingery, and just kind of went up and did Hypnotized Minds. And that was a bit of a shock to the climbing community. And some people felt like perhaps it was a bit of a fluke. It really fit him well and his specific body weight at the time. And so it's interesting to hear that when you did it, you were, that was not part of your routine. And so that makes me wonder if you had used weight manipulation in the past, and how you think about it now, if ever you do that.
Yeah, I kind of threw my scale away, and that's not something I would suggest to everyone, but yeah, I'm just more about climbing by feel than by weight, and it wasn't always that way. I especially being a bigger climber, I was a little bit more concerned about like, um, I know I feel good at this weight, so if I'm not that weight, then I'm not going to feel good. And I found that that actually was leading to more bad sessions than it was leading to good sessions. And so that was just the best thing for me. I don't weigh myself often, and that's more just a personal choice. But I would rather just feel good and know that I feel good rather than feel good and then okay, well, let me confirm, let me consult with the scale and to know that I feel good rather than so that's just my own kind of personal choice. But
No, that's great. It's just you can extend that thinking onto a lot of other areas where metrics are just metrics, and don't, just because you hit a hangboard PR or didn't, does not tell you as much as maybe you think, and it can be detrimental. There's this thing, you can get like a sleep score. You wear an Aura ring. I used to do more sleep tracking, but then I read some study where they told, if people were told that they had a bad sleep score, they felt like crap. And if they were told they slept well, they felt great. And it's placebo, but the whole point
really,
was is that sometimes these things are inaccurate, and it could ruin a person's day, even if they did have good sleep. And that you have to be careful with metrics and not let it mess with the reality of what you're doing.
yep, completely agree. Yeah, you just got to go by feel, man. Like and that's what I've learned. Like if I don't feel great, then I'm gonna rest today, and if I feel great, then I'm gonna go climb today. And that's mainly what I go by now.
Matt, good job on Hypnotized Minds, man. Talk about big moves
Thank
off of small crimps. That is just congrats, man. That's quite a gem to put in your on your resume there. And what I'm wondering is since that was your first V16 and it was no joke of a hard climb, what did that do to your vision of the future, and how did it change what you decided to get on next?
Yeah, it opened up a lot of possibilities for me mentally. At that point, I was like, well, I don't feel limited anymore. Like, I don't think that there's a boulder that I can't do. And that was literally my mentality. A lot of ways, it still is because that was kind of the first time I pushed through a process like that. And I saw all the benefits of like going all in on something in that way. And I it really did just kind of open those doors for me. And like, oh, I want to try harder boulders because I know that this process works. Like I saw something like this all the way through um, on a boulder like this, and so how, how can this process work on other boulders? And so I've just kind of taken that to every hard boulder that I've done since then, and used a similar process. And then like I mentioned, like what I think is my hardest send now for me personally is Big Z, and that was just like the same process, but really taken even further and yeah, just more extreme.
Yeah, my first question was not dumb. Your mentality is that any boulder is possible. So when you go to a place like Squamish with thousands of boulders, that's a lot of boulders. Okay, good to know that I was on track there.
Nice.
Uh, okay, we can think about this with Big Z too, but I think this applies to any deep, long process of going into a projecting mode is when you are up for however many sessions it takes, how do you balance the grit and long-term determination with actually executing? And does it make sense there where it's like, okay, I'm just going to show up and do it, but sometimes like you want to pull the trigger, and you show up and try to pull the trigger every time, or how do you know when it's like go time?
Yeah, that's kind of tough to know. You kind of get a feeling, I think, and sometimes it's like you kind of have a session where things just click, and you're like, okay, now I know I can do this. Like I made the important links that I needed to make mentally. Um, there's not like one hard and fast rule when that happens for me. Like it is just, I think I can kind of get a sense of like the important links that need to be made before I start giving very serious start attempts. And it's like as soon as I kind of make those important links, and I'm like, I can start trying this from start with a very serious goal of getting to the top. And that's kind of when it clicks. And that's when I start like losing a little bit of sleep over it and like getting into that like obsessive territory about the boulder. Um, and then, and then some tactics need to change at that point, and it needs to be just more about performance and recovery rather than I'm not figuring things out anymore. I'm just like it's like, yeah, execute time.
Can you tell me a little bit about Big Z and what happened that allowed you to execute on it over the many seasons that you tried it?
Yeah. So yeah, I tried it probably so like 2 years, but it was like 2 seasons per year, so um it was a while. And uh and that was tough too because it's far away. It's, I I bought a house in Boise before I even started trying it. So we live here, and we were trying it, and that's in Tahoe, like over 7 hours away. So, um, and it's freaking expensive there too. Like Airbnbs are crazy expensive, and luckily we've got a good friend that lived there and was very kind to let us borrow his cabin on some of the days. But I love South Lake Tahoe, but like it's not easy to just stay there for a long time. Um, but yeah, so we went back over and over, and um, that what was interesting about it was I felt like I was in that execution mode for a while. Like I made the important links, and um, what's funny is like in the second to last season, early in the second to last season, I got to the last move from start. Like even like well past the crux, I just kind of missed it. My toe hook slipped out, whatever. Like it seemed like that just wouldn't happen again. Like that was probably just one of those like, okay, this is the that attempt where you kind of just fail right towards the end. There was a little like something I could have done a little bit better to like improve my efficiency, but I'm just going to improve it next time, and I'll do it. And so I was in that mode for so long because then I just had regression, and I'm not that used to that because I'm usually take pride in like I'm always progressing on these climbs. But this one was not, and it was definitely a mental regression as well. Like I was putting a lot more pressure on myself because I even had a trip to Switzerland planned that season, and that was putting some time pressure on me because I wanted to make sure that I finished Big Z before we left for Switzerland. Like that would be what a huge and amazing confidence boost that would have been, like going into this to like a big trip. And uh so I got I got that close, and it came, and it was like the week before we were supposed to leave, and I was like, I don't like, oh, that's like so much pressure on me to send this right now before I leave, that I feel like if I just cancel the Switzerland trip, then I'll have that pressure taken off of me and I can do it. And so I did. I actually canceled the trip, so that I could not feel the pressure. Like I could be mentally like relaxed. And in a way it helped, but in another way it didn't. And it actually added more pressure on me because I was like, well, I canceled a trip for this, like to do this climb. Like I deserve to do this climb now. And I think when it flipped away from like go time into like, well, now I like just need to do this and I just want to get it done. And I'm like sick of this climb. That's when there was a lot of regression and I just wasn't moving well on the climb at all anymore. And I didn't even do it that season. So that was a really tough pill to swallow for me. Like the process that I normally go through uh, wasn't progressing the way that I was used to. So um, that was a struggle. But then, I took the season off. The snow came. I couldn't climb there in the winter, but then I actually just went back in the spring when I had no trips planned and was like, I'm just gonna like test it out on this random. Like we took a random trip actually to LA, and we just stopped in Tahoe on the way down because we were going down to visit Mad Rock headquarters. We took a random stop in Tahoe, and I was like, a little preseason, I'll like hold the positions and stuff, and I actually just ended up doing it. So it's like, sweet, I mean, I'll take it. But yeah, so I mean, that was special, absolutely. But it was like I learned so much, and one of the big things I learned was like I just have to I have to enjoy the process when I'm in it. And just because I flip the switch and I'm like, okay, it's go time, I'm going to execute. I still have to have that enjoyment of the process, and it can just never get into the territory of like trying to force it. Like I have to make this happen or else kind of mentality is detrimental to me.
That's that's a cool story, Matt, because it's interesting to hear about how you're used to showing up, making progress, and succeeding. Even if it takes you a while, you're like, yeah, but I succeed. I'm gonna do it. And then really being confronted with a time it doesn't work and then still sticking around, refactoring how to approach it and having success. I don't know. It's cool to hear because I've been in that situation where you're like, screw this climb. I'm not having fun. I don't want to do it. And I would say that it's more likely that, then I don't do it, because it's really hard to completely like if you've had so much success with a with the approach that you're taking, having it not succeed can be really painful and make you grow. So that's a cool story, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I'm happy, of course, that it had like a happy ending, and I was able to do it in the end. But I'm also like mostly thankful that I learned so much that I can take into projects in the future. So send or no send, like it was a very it was just a formative experience. I grew a lot from it. So.
Well, then I gotta ask Matt, when does one know, maybe you, but maybe someone you're working with, when does one know that perhaps they bit off more than they can chew on a project?
Yeah, I actually, I'm not really big on saying something's like too hard. Um, for my athletes, usually like maybe their client, it's actually, I don't know if I've ever, I mean, it exists that there are problems that are just inappropriate to try at your ability level because it could expose you to injury, or it could expose you to movement pattern, or introduce you to complex movement patterns that you haven't even learned yet. Like those kinds of things, like you need to like kind of master the fundamentals of those movements before you jump into like the really really hard versions of them. So like I think there are maybe inappropriate versions or like inappropriate problems for some people. And But generally, I think the athletes I work with have good intuition for that. So um, it's more often I'm encouraging them to like try something hard, like really, really hard. As long as you're not risking injury, like you're gonna learn something, and like be okay trying something really hard just so that you can learn from it and not to send it. But it's also like you never know. So um,
I like that. I like that being careful with language instead of being like, no, this you can't do this. It's just it should be more like, well, maybe this isn't right for you right now, but if you want to do that, go for it. Like and I was actually just climbing last night with some friends of mine, and I put them both we were rope climbing, but I put them both on something maybe like a whole number grade harder than I typically see them on. And they didn't have instant success, but I just was like, I basically what I'm saying is I agree with you where typically I feel like I encourage people to go on something harder rather than the other way. And so
yeah.
I like that. I like that you push your athletes to see what they're capable of, because you never know. Each climb is different. And I often say that too, where it works on the opposite too, where be careful. Just because you think you can do a grade does not mean you can do that climb, because each climb, well, yeah, I've got my butt kicked on all sorts of grades.
100%, and me too. So, but I just try and treat every new boulder as a learning opportunity. If it's easy or if it's hard, like I think that it has something to teach me, and it's important to do, and it's like a skill that I can help develop, or like help like reinforce, that's going to serve me later on. And so that's something that I also try and instill in the athletes, and in my athletes, and that like too hard or too easy, let's try and master the skills that this problem demands. And if you send it, then that's amazing, and if you don't send it, well, you've learned some new skills. And if that's like the worst you can say that you took away from a climb, then that's still a success in my mind.
I agree, but I like sending, Matt.
Yeah,
Uh,
Sin is
okay.
nice.
Okay, Matt, after talking about some of the hardest, crimpiest, most amazing V16s out there in the world, let's go back inside, and I want to hear a little bit more about boards. And I was talking to the Wheeler brothers, Ben and Noah, and they wanted to know, Matt, what are some of the hardest board climbs out there?
Oh, that's funny. Uh, the hardest board climbs are the ones on my spray wall.
Of course.
So the wheelers have to come out here and try those out.
I would love to see that YouTube. I would love to see that on Wheel Rock. Just putting it out there. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, they're welcome anytime. Um, well, honestly, probably the 10 hardest board climbs I've ever done are on my spray wall. But beyond that, like I guess on the tension board too, I guess jaded is probably the hardest at 40 degrees. Um, it's funny. There are some that I feel like I've done that are harder. I actually did jaded in a day. And I put it at V14, but I was kind of hesitant because uh, it didn't quite like it. I knew it was hard, but it's like, well, there's some easier rated boulders. It took me longer, but it was, I think, so stylistic, and um, it has this huge move. Not everyone knows what boulder I'm talking about, but it has this really huge move that's like full span for me, and I have a 6'5" wingspan, and um, kind of the theme of the boulder was like kind of connecting these two thin crimps that are like really far apart. And so I don't know if it's had a repeat yet. I don't think so. Um, but yeah, I might be wrong, but I don't know if that's been done again yet. But that's probably the hardest thing on the TB2. Although my my garage wall is fixed, so it's fixed at 40 degrees. So I haven't tested anything else out at 45 or 50 or at any other angle. So um, there might be some boulders that are harder for me at those angles.
Mm. What about the infamous kitten paws?
Kitten paws. That's another funny one. I get asked about kitten paws often. It was another one that I did in like a session, um, and didn't and like there are some that felt like way harder for me. But I don't know if I was just feeling super good and crimpy that day or what. But that one's just funny because there are so many other like really hard ones I felt like I've done, or much harder ones I felt like I've done. I think Migos is probably the hardest on the tension board one,
Mm.
um, with like the fewest repeats and like confirmations at V14. Um, and I set that one as well. Uh, but again, like it's so hard. There's thousands of boulders. I haven't tested them all. And then I can't speak as intelligently to like the kilter board and the moon board, even though I think they're fantastic tools. I just don't have them here uh, close to me to access. So I haven't climbed on them as much. But on the moon board, the hardest thing I've done is probably Black Beauty. There's a Daniel Woods V13 on the original, the 2016 set. And that's probably the hardest one I've done. But there's got to be harder ones on the last few sets. I'm sure. Like there's probably harder ones. Um, and then yeah, like the kilter board's probably the one I've climbed on the least. Even though I love climbing on the kilter board, but I don't know. I've done a lot of like Jimmy Webb's V13s, and those are the hardest ones I've done. But I know that there's harder ones than those. So but I just haven't tried them yet.
What do the different boards represent to you? Like if you were to have clients on them or yourself, like how would you encourage them to use the boards as training tools? The different
Mhm.
ones, the kilter, tension, moon board, all of them.
Yeah. I mean, generally, I think they're most useful for like building projecting tactics and without having to go outside. So I encourage my athletes to like build a project roster. I like 10. I like having like 10 varied projects. Um, and so like on your projecting days, you can pick, two or three maybe of those 10 to try, and you're really honing in on those, and you're being detail oriented, and you're resting and you're brushing, and like you're just like going through your projecting um, process on those climbs. And so I think it's really great for that, because it's something you can go back to over and over for seasons if you have to. You can go back to the same boulders. So that's really useful. We do some on the wall interval work as well. Like it's nice and convenient to do intervals. So if we're doing 2x2s, 4x4s, something like that. I actually prefer the boards usually to like a commercial set. And not that there's anything wrong with doing them on commercial sets, but I feel like it's very valuable and maybe even more convenient to do them on the board, where you can come off and chalk up and get right back on a lot faster. And maybe you're not doing as like there's not going to be as many like odd moves, I guess, that wouldn't be appropriate for like a 4x4, uh, like some commercial sets might have. So
I mean, it's tough when you're in the gym actually finding four boulders that are appropriate for you in somewhat vicinity of each other. That that makes
exactly.
me wonder if so you have a home wall. It evidently has the 10, quite potentially the 10 hardest board climbs ever. And I know you climb outside a lot. Uh, is that and you do some off the wall training? Is that basically what your climbing consists of, Matt? Or do you ever go to commercial gyms? Do you ever tie in? What like kind of percentage of those things make up your actual climbing schedule?
Yeah, sure. I climb outside as often as I can. Like if I could do every session outside, I probably would. Um, and then beyond that, it really is kind of home walls makes up. If I'm not outside, that's probably 90% of my training is just my home boards and my strength training along with that. So I do enjoy going to the gym. We have a couple of great gyms here in Boise. Shout out to like Vertical View, Asana, Climbing Gym, and the Commons are just great gyms here. And I like going there, but usually when I go there, I'm doing more like movement, uh, drill work, and I'm doing things that I don't see on the board as much. So if there's like some power endurance, hard power endurance boulders, I'll try and work on those. And then I warm up by doing a lot of heel hooking um, because that's something that I don't get to do as often on the board. And so I'm just heel hooking, just trying to heel hook everything, get my hamstrings really strong. Uh, and that technique more dialed. And but I go to the gym probably uh, maybe not quite once a week, um, maybe 3 times a month on average.
Yeah, that's not that much. Well, it also, when you have a great spray wall and a tension board at home, it's you don't need to travel too much. Uh, I got to ask you one last question on boards, and that is around grading. And you said maybe Jaded was V14 or you gave it V13. What does that mean? Is it V14 like, have you ever tried a V16 on a board? Does V16 exist? Why haven't we seen V15s or V16s on boards?
Yeah, I don't know. People are just scared to throw it out there. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, there should be. I think there should be. So I've done. I mean, I on my spray wall, I've graded boulders V15. Um, but I think maybe that is like maybe I'm being cowardly because like no one's gonna come to my spray wall and unless the wheelers come, like they're welcome.
Yes.
But yeah, like no one's just gonna come and like downgrade all my problems on the spray wall. so, um, but yeah, I mean, I think there should be like, there's no reason that there can't be a V16 on the 40-degree TB2. So maybe we should start working on that.
Yeah, I was talking to Tension about this. I want to like kick in a bounty or something to really see a V16 on a board. Like because we know, of course it exists, but for some reason the community hasn't quite allowed us to even see V15. And one thought I do have is that it's it's hard to get those grades with just a few moves. It's there's a subtle line there where it's like impossible, or like a two move V16 is pretty gonna be pretty tricky. Where maybe with the new TB2 you can kind of have a more consistent. It's just got that broader length that can allow it to be a multiple move kind of, two V14 stacked on top of each other. But that's my one guess as to why we haven't really seen as much hard grades either. But I don't know what I'm talking about. Those are grades that are very unknown to me and to most. But just that was my last question on board. I love how prolific you've been on developing board climbs and putting out FAs there too. So I couldn't help but ask. And let's use that to transition into your love of developing. You have done a ton of FAs, as I mentioned, two V15s in one day, 7 plus V15 and harder first descents. What do you? Why is developing so important to you, and what attracts you to specific lines?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think doing first ascents is so much fun. First of all, you're seeing a piece of rock that's like inspiring, and you want to know if it's possible, and like the curiosity too of like how does the sequence go, is and can it be, maybe it's like an exciting move that or sequence of moves that I haven't seen before, I haven't discovered, and so there's some excitement and there's some mystery, and curiosity kind of like scratches those parts of the brain for me. And also in a way, like there's kind of a legacy aspect to it too. You know, it's like I'm not going to be climbing forever, and I'm not going to be around forever. But you know, rock and you know some rocks change, but you know, generally, like that rock's going to be there a lot longer than I am, and I think it's pretty cool that you know maybe if I'm blessed to have kids someday, and they get into climbing, and they can go to these boulders that I'm brushing up and climbing uh, close to home, and they can be like, you know, my dad got the first ascent of this climb, and I don't know, I think just that thought is pretty cool.
There's something about being able to kind of almost encapsulate an experience in a boulder and then pass that along. It's like, oh yeah, like that heartbreaker last move, I fell on that 4 times, and just having someone else get to go through that same process, fail, also have success. And I often think about Lonnie Kauk, which is Ron Kauk's kid, and you
Mm,
see him go and repeat Midnight Lightning, repeat Magic Line, both first
right.
ascents by Ron Kauk, and I'm always like, yeah, that's cool. There's something special
Hmm.
there. So you're adding to the
Yeah,
community
shared
with that.
experience. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, what's it like in your area in Idaho? Is there tons of undone lines? I never think of Idaho as being a major destination, but sometimes that's because it hasn't been opened up. It takes someone like you to attract people by doing lines that then someone sees a video and says, "Oh, I want to get on that Matt Fultz line."
Right. Yeah. There is a lot of climbing around here in the Boise area. There's just there is a lot of rock. Um, it's tough because we're a little bit out of the way. You know, we're 5 hours from Salt Lake, and you know, 7+ from Leavenworth, and 7+ from Tahoe, and those like more those areas that like yeah, 7+ from Joe's Valleys, and those areas have better climbing than we do. Like no question. Um, but Boise is such like a great place to live because there's so much rock, and so much potential as well to do more. And so it's just like it's fun to live here, and I get to explore and find fresh rock that I get to climb all the time. So I think that's pretty fun.
What do the lines look like that speak to you the most out there?
Yeah, so I mean, here, like very local to Boise, there's Swan Falls, which is a great area. It has so much rock, like I was mentioning. It's non-columnar basalt, and you know it, and the way it's right next to a river, and so a lot of it's river polished. There's some perfect crimps. It's like well featured. Um, really the only downside is that the average height of the boulder is like a little bit taller than me. So you know, generally they're very short, very powerful sit starts, and you know, lots of fun lines, but you're doing really hard, like 2 or 3 movers. Uh, but I'm into that stuff. Like I kind of like it. So
It's like board
that's definitely
climbing.
Swan Falls style. Yeah. Yeah, definitely Swan Falls style. But if you're willing to drive like an extra hour and a half or two or a couple of hours, then you get up north, and you're into the forests, the Payette Forest, and there's a lot of amazing granite up there with high balls. Really hard lines, and that's where I was climbing most of this summer was up in Cascade. That's a couple hours from where I live. Um, but you know, it was like when you get it dialed, that becomes like kind of an easy day trip. And so I was day tripping up there, and that's where I was doing a lot of first ascents and just brushing things up, and it was fun, really fun to get all that dialed in. And there's so much left to do up there too. So I'm excited to continue getting up there this fall in better temperatures, and then I get to go back out next summer too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Something that blows me away about you, Matt, is that you're out there in a place that is not as well trafficked. I know that the scene out there is maybe not as not as big, and you're probably one of the strong. Well, you're one of the strongest in the world, so you're probably one of the strongest in Idaho. How do you keep motivated? How do you keep trying your hardest? How do you keep trying your hardest when there's no one cheering you on? What's it like to be at the top of your game all by yourself?
Well, that's nice. There are several strong climbers here, and there's a great climbing community here in Boise that I love. Generally, when I'm climbing outside, I am climbing by myself. I really enjoy. So one of my best friends is Mike McClure, and he lives locally here in Boise, and um, uh, but he's like a real adult. He has two kids, and he owns a business, and uh, so I don't get. He's very busy, and I don't get to climb outside with him as often as I would like to. So often, yeah, it is just Haley and I. But that's what I'm used to, really, and I have no trouble pushing myself um, when I'm by myself, or when it's just Haley and I. And sometimes it's even kind of nice. It can even be peaceful, and I can really feel like I can be myself, and I'm not trying to live up to expectations or anything outside of just being there and being focused and enjoying my time in the mountains with my wife. So that's I honestly even that's even when I perform my best.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I get messages from people all the time that they're in some little town out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's kind of flat. They don't have a ton of rock. And I will tell you, Matt, that one of my most common things that I say to people when they ask me about how do they get better is to go climb with people who are better than them, because it's a good shortcut. And the reality is that's not always possible. And so I just think it's cool to hear that you just are in love with what you're doing, and that why wouldn't you push yourself? Why wouldn't you try your hardest? And I don't know, I feel like it's a message I need to hear too, because as someone with two kids and a business and a real adult life, I don't always get to have that crew that I want to have or that I used to have. And finding that try hard in those short moments when I do get it is it's just something I'm always working on. I think other people also want to know how to have success even when they don't have a big crew cheering them on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and something that helps motivate me too is like I'm I'm not generally a competitive person with other people. Like I really do wish the best for everyone. Uh, but I am pretty competitive against myself. And so what's highly motivating for me is being better than I was yesterday or last session. And so that really does drive me, that keeps driving me um, to self improvement because there's nothing worse than like I mentioned before, like there's nothing worse than regressing and feeling like I wasn't like I'm not as good as I was, or that like I'm lacking in this area that I used to be better at. Those kinds of things, and those can be big motivators for me to like keep pushing. Yeah, just competing against myself mainly.
I totally hear you, Matt. But something that's really interesting is that when I look at where you're at in climbing, I'm like, how much more can Matt progress? Like, what's it like when you when things start slowing down and your progressions are, instead of even just being 1%, maybe it's 0.1% this month.
Yeah, it's funny to hear the outside perspective because I feel like I have so many areas to get better in, and there's a lot of times I feel like I suck, and like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, it's just nice to hear an outside perspective that doesn't I can't see areas I can improve because I'm like, oh gosh, I I sometimes I don't think I'm good at anything, but
Well, what is your kryptonite then, Matt? And how do you think about bringing up those weaknesses versus continuing to lean into your strengths?
yeah, and that's a tricky question. So I think it's okay to keep training strengths as long as like it's serving you. So as an example, like a lot of the climbing I was doing this year was in Cascade, and a lot of it's like steep, hard crimping, like steep, hard, powerful crimping, and that's what I love to do, and that's like what I'm best at. And so I'm like, well, it's okay if I want to just keep training on my home wall and doing the steep, hard crimping, and then that's just serving me when I go out, and it's just serving me in my goals. Uh, I like to be well rounded, and I like to be good at, at least proficient in every area. But yeah, so what I would kind of consider a weakness is like I've had some like hamstring injuries, and so there are just some specific heel hooks that really are difficult for me. Like there's just pain involved with it, and I don't feel secure or strong in those areas, which can be difficult. So yeah, um, I try to train my heel hooks, and I try to stretch and strengthen my hamstrings as often as possible. But yeah, I if I don't have to heel hook, then I won't, and I'll be good at, at crimping and climbing powerfully.
Really bad when moves actually are painful versus just you're not so good at it. That's no fun. But the reckoning, a little bit of technical heel hooking there. So it seems like your weakness is, just a notch or two below. So good job on that one.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, what's funny is, I mean, those heel hooks felt pretty good, and I do work hard to improve my weaknesses. But what's funny is like I'm still like it's been a week since we got back from Squamish, but like my hamstrings are still killing me because
Wow,
there's so
interesting.
much heel hooking. Yeah.
Well, you got to be careful out there too, because there's a thing called squam knee, which is like this thing that people
Mm,
get in Squamish, which is knee problems because of all the heel hooking. So,
yeah.
okay,
Squam knee. Nice.
yeah, do not get Squamney. Although, if you spent a lot of time in Squamish, I bet you after a season or two, you would be heel hooking like a champ because
I probably
that is the foothold, is the heel hook.
right.
So I know that you get a lot of joy out of developing, uh, but I'm curious if you have your eye on any specific lines that you want to repeat that are established. And I ask it very specifically because someone at your level, you're picking climbs like Big Z is, I don't want to say it's out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's in my freaking backyard, but that's like a very specific climb for you to go and pick. And so I'm wondering if there's anything on your radar that you think is worth traveling to repeat.
Yeah, there are several that I would love. I just love traveling too. And like I'm so blessed that that's something that I get to do on a regular basis. And I mean, and then the best part is going and getting to try new problems and challenge myself on new things. And so yeah, there are several that I'm really motivated on. A lot of things in Switzerland that are really really high on my life list. I'm going to Albarracin in Spain in November, so I'm really motivated because there's a few lifeless boulders there. Just like it just looks awesome, and you get to do like some steep sandstone climbing, and yeah, so like that's kind of next on the list, and I've been doing my homework and writing up my lists and watching the videos of like all the sick climbing out there. So that's going to be awesome to get to explore and be there. And I right now, like specifically, I have more projects here locally that just I am so psyched on. And I've told Haley like I'm since these boulders are local, I'm not ever gonna not take a trip or cancel a trip to get something here done. But I'm also not gonna like pace myself, or like on anything here. And I have a lot of motivation for a lot of these boulders, and there are things that I've brushed up that I actually think are probably 16 or 17, like V16 or V17. And the fact that those are local and that I can, um, go to putting in like 100 sessions on a climb doesn't, I mean, that does seem daunting, but it doesn't seem like an impossibility. That's like highly motivating.
God, I love how your mind works. You're like, oh, it could take like 100 sessions, but it's right here, so I can do that.
Right.
I do think that there's something to be said for finding some kind of, maybe urgency is the wrong word, but sometimes when it's local, you kind of half-ass it. You're kind of like, well, I mean, it's here. And having, sometimes when you know a trip is closing or you have to travel for it, put a lot of effort into getting those attempts, it kind of puts a little more, pressure in a good way, sometimes a bad way. But
Mhm.
that's cool, man. I just, again, I like how your mind works on that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, funny enough, I feel like local projects I can, like, I definitely don't force, like you're saying, like you're not, I don't force the sessions, and I usually stop when I'm feeling powered down. I'm like more effectively, I'm projecting because I'm just putting in my good attempts. And then when I feel powered down, I'm not really forcing anything. Maybe I'll clean up some of the easier sections or something like that. But I'll try to make the best use of my time. But I'm not. I don't feel like I need to force anything.
Totally, totally. Well, I can't wait to see some media on that. It's because I don't know it when I'll get out to Idaho next, and I do hope that when you go to Switzerland, you try some of Aiden Roberts, some of those really thin test pieces that, I don't know, just from one board climber to another. Those pieces of stone look hard and pure. That kind of classic style that you were inspired by as a kid. And I don't know. I just I also, despite not always being so good at it, there is something to be said for just small crimps, big moves.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, Aiden's a big motivator for me too. Like he's a friend, and I'm really inspired by his climbs and his climbing. And so yeah, I would love to go out there and try. A lot of his boulders are up high on my list.
Yeah, good eye on them too. Yeah, those things are cool. Okay, Matt. Well, let's start closing it out, and I'm going to ask you my classic question, and that's how do you go from good to great?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've pretty much been talking about the whole time. Like I think people count themselves out a little too early when they're projecting. That's something I see a lot from my athletes, and it's something that I want to encourage my clients and also your listeners to do is like, don't be afraid to put in those multiple sessions, and even if the first session feels like, oh, this is like impossible. I've been there, uh, and I've been there, and I will be there. Multiple times. Like that first session just feels awful, but it doesn't mean that the second, third, fourth, fifth, like you're just going to learn and improve. And at the end of the day, like what should kind of encourage you to do that and give you the courage to do that is if you send or don't send, you're going to learn. And so if you're approaching problems with that attitude of this is going to help me learn and this is going to serve me later, then that opens the door to a lot of new problems for you.
Yeah, Matt, you've always had this kind of persona of someone who's just gonna show up, gonna work hard, gonna get everything in your favor by putting in the effort, lining things up, being diligent. And I mean, and you sure lived up to that on this podcast too. And it's just, I feel like it's, everyone kind of showcases their persona when they do something at a very high level. And there's something that was really refreshing about your style where you're out there putting in the work. It doesn't seem quite like magic. I mean, I don't want to take that. That's not supposed to diminish it in any way. Just that you put out this thing like, hey, like show up, do the work, and who knows what can happen.
Yeah, and I appreciate that actually. Like that's a compliment to me. I want to be honest and like real with like the struggles or the processes I go through. I do have to work really hard to climb the things that I do, and like I'm not just some like natural genetically talented freak, that's going out and just easily, like, anything I send is just like easy, like a session or two. I do have to put in that work, but realizing that that's like my talent, that's what I'm good at, is putting in the work and seeing a process all the way through, and learning quickly and adjusting quickly. Knowing that that's my superpower, and that was kind of when I feel like I kind of fully came into myself as a climber, uh, and kind of got to that next level. And so I hope that that's something that speaks to other people, and can help other people push themselves to another level.
Well, it's really relatable and it's interesting to think about. Sometimes your superpower is not, oh, my full crimp is really strong. It may be something that is not so obviously related to the task at hand that you need to lean into to find out what you're made of. And I think that's just a really cool insight. And I love that story you told around hypno and just what it actually took, and the unlock it gave you. So yeah, I loved it, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, Josh. I appreciate you, and that's yeah, it's a big deal to me. Those intangibles too are like you mentioned, like the superpower is not just like your full crimp, or like your pulling power, or like you just like can't get pumped, like those kinds of things. I can't relate to that very well because, well, like I don't have those superpowers. I think I'm proficient. I have like decent strength and I have good resistance, but like um, my strengths lie elsewhere, and that's encouraging to me. So.
Well, on all that, no, I want to plug off the ground training that you do, OTG. You have this coaching business with you and your wife that also covers nutrition. And, Matt, I think you may be one of the most accomplished climbers to really put out a coaching business. I don't think it's not always the best climbers that make the best coaches, but just hearing about your approach, knowing what your superpower is, and being able to help others find what they're good at. I just wanted to make sure that we plug that at the end because I think that your style lends itself to helping others.
Yeah, thanks. And it just felt like such a natural progression for me, and it's something that I really, really, really love and enjoy. And uh, yeah, I mean that's like it's my career. That's what I want to do. Just for the rest of my life, I want to share this passion and this thing that has like improved my life so much, and brought my life so much extra value. I want to share that, and help others see see climbing through my perspective, like uh, and try to improve themselves in that way, and that's just so like rewarding for me. So it's been such a blessing.
And that's what you're saying. It's always about getting better than you were the day before. That's the treadmill we're on, but somehow really fun. I also just want to take a quick moment to shout out Kenny at Mad Rock and all of Mad Rock for kind of making this happen too. And I don't know if we can share that you were going to do a cool thing with Mad Rock in the Cascades. We can cut that if we have to, but just unfortunately it fell through, and we don't get to see all the cool lines you were talking about. But thanks to those guys for putting us together, and I hear nothing but good things from the athletes that work with Mad Rock.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Mad Rock's the best, and Kenny is awesome. And yeah, like you mentioned, we were gonna do a team trip to Cascade, the boulders that I've been mentioning up here in Idaho. But there's a fire that is currently burning through the forest, and they closed the public land down, the public forest down for the next few weeks, I believe. So yeah, I mean, just I'm mostly hoping for everyone to be safe up there, and for there to be, no, not too much property damage, and things like that. I was also extremely bummed that we had to cancel the trip, and we couldn't climb on the boulders, and I couldn't share those with everyone. But the good news is I've been holding back some of the uncut footage of because I've gotten video of everything, and I've been not sharing it because I wasn't sure what we were going to be filming on the Mad Rock trip. But since that got canceled, I'll probably put out a video with all the uncuts here in the next few weeks, maybe when the forest opens.
Just have to save the trip for next year, and let's just hope no property damage and somehow things
Yeah.
burned away to uncover new cool boulders. That's the best we can hope
That's
for.
absolutely, yeah. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks for sitting down with me today, and have fun in Albarracin. Yeah, I love traveling too, and going to Spain to climb cool boulder. Have fun, man. That will be fun.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to it. Yeah, that's going to be amazing. But so thank you so much.
All right, Matt. Take care, man. Until next time.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, good talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like even more content, go to patreon.com/testpiece. And while you're at it, share this podcast with someone you know who would love it. And please leave us a review or rating at wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got tons of great content on YouTube and Instagram, so don't forget to like and subscribe there. Okay, see you next week.